Dominick Cruz was stripped of his championship belt and many of his prime years due to his constant injuries, but nothing ever seemed to get to him. So what was the secret to his mental strength? Dom Cruz is the former Bantamweight world champion who has potentially had the most injuries of any UFC athlete ever. In a span of 3 years, he tore both his ACLs, his groin, his shoulder, and broke his arm. The UFC had no choice but to strip him of his belt, which simultaneously took away his greatest accomplishment and livelihood. He fell into a deep depression as fighting was all he had, but he fought his way out of it and came back better than ever to be the first UFC champion to reclaim their belt. He credits it to his mental strength. So to understand where Dom's mental strength truly comes from, we have to examine his life. Dom Cruz was raised in a trailer park by a single mom in Tucson, Arizona. At the age of 18, he found MMA as an escape from his difficult life. Without any money, he cleaned the gym to pay for his membership. While he was going to school, MMA was his true passion and what he spent most of his time doing. One day, a 4-0 pro showed up to the gym looking for someone to spar. Dom whooped the dude and then realized he could do this as a career. Dom would go on a tear, winning 10 in a row, beating big names like Mighty Mouse and Uriah Faber on his way to becoming UFC champion. But he then suffers an insane string of injuries. The UFC strips his belt due to his inactivity and he becomes deeply depressed. All this time injured on the sideline gives Dom a lot of time to think, and he realizes that fighting was his whole identity because fighting was all he knew. So taking away fighting and his belt made him feel worthless. But during his injury time, he realizes he can be happy without the belt and stops identifying so much with fighting. He realizes fighting is something he does, not who he is.
You don't need fighting to be these things. You need to let go of fighting to learn that you are something without it. And that was actually a gift. Some people retire for 5 years, lose their freaking mind, end up in the bar and come back and try to fight again 10 years later. Fighting was their life. Fighting is who they are. Fighting is their persona. So take away fighting, what are they? They're in the bar, drinking away what they're not. Instead of drinking, putting the booze down and knowing what you are without fighting.
Think of your self-worth like a table held up by legs. If 100% of your self-worth comes from being a great athlete, there's only one leg supporting the table. Then, like in Dom's case, an injury takes away the one leg of the table and the whole thing crumbles. The first piece of Dom becoming mentally resilient was him realizing he was much more than a fighter and diversifying his identity. Dom took this time off to evaluate his skills. He realizes he has a very analytical mind and moves to commentating. Commentating also leads to him being an analyst. On top of this, he spends more time and energy helping his teammates and gym grow.
If I'm not doing my own therapy, I'm helping the team out here at Alliance.
All the time away forces him to become much more than a fighter. Now he's a commentator, an analyst, a gym owner, a teammate, and a coach. This is called identity diversification. Losing or being injured is now a much easier pill to swallow because being a prize fighter is not the only thing in his life that gives him self-worth now. Dom, now with identity diversification and a stronger sense of self, learns to appreciate his injuries. He realizes that they gave him immense perspective and helped him develop into a more well-rounded person. He even goes so far as to call them a gift.
It became a gift because I learned so much in life now, bigger than fighting. I look at the things that I went through as a gift.
I even remember Dana going, "You have the worst luck of anybody I've ever seen in my entire life." He called me and said that to me, and I said, "What is that doing for me?" So I'm like, "How does that serve me?" And it didn't. And I was like, "Okay, well, think about it. I can either have the worst luck or I can turn this into something better."
This is called post-traumatic growth, choosing to view our past as good, no matter how bad it seemed in the moment. Your past has almost nothing to do with what occurred. It's all the story you're telling yourself about it. And so instead of being a victim, Dom chooses an empowering story that his injuries helped him become a more well-rounded person and someone who serves others. Before, it was all about him. He was the champion, and all he did was fight and train. Now injured with no chance to fight, he takes the focus off himself and starts looking outside of himself for who he can help.
Depression is a selfish emotion. When you're laying on your couch and your knees are blown out and you can't move, you're sad because you can't move. But when you start focusing on, okay, I'm sad because I can't move, but who can I make a difference for? Well, what about mixed martial arts, who gave me the outlet to even be complaining about right now that I lost? I focused out and I found a way to make a difference for the athletes in the sport. And it ended up being media. And I didn't know that that's what it was going to be, but it just turned out to be that.
He realizes his analytical mind can help both fighters and viewers. Now a color commentator and analyst, he helps break down the fight to help millions of people get a better understanding of what's going on. This new role gives him a much deeper purpose than simply being a prize fighter. Previously, he had been obsessing over his injuries and his misfortune. He shifted to thinking about how he could be in service to others, and this perspective shift takes him out of his depression. Then when he finally comes back, he wins the belt, and it's supposed to be a Cinderella story. Enter Cody Garbrandt. Dom Cruz had been beefing with Team Alpha Male for a decade and had previously beaten prominent members of the team, TJ Dillashaw and Uriah Faber. He seemingly figured them all out until Cody challenged for the belt. With hours and hours of cage time against Dom, Team Alpha Male crafted Cody specifically to beat Dom Cruz. Not only did Cody beat Dom, he dropped him several times and was showboating throughout the fight. Dom lost a clear unanimous decision. 10 years undefeated came to a sudden halt. To make matters worse, his loss came at the hands of his bitter rivals who had been preying on his downfall for a decade. People wondered how Dom would react. Would he be upset? Would he blame an injury?
Some people said maybe you weren't quite at 100% tonight.
They're wrong. I was there. That was 100% me. I was healthy. Here I am, dealing with the truth right now. I lost, and I'm going to take it like a man.
He faces it like a man with extreme ownership. Extreme ownership is a term popularized by retired Navy SEAL officer Jocko Willink, referring to the idea of claiming responsibility for everything in your world to an extreme degree. The term originated from one of Jocko's deployments. During a mission overseas, due to a miscommunication, there was a blue-on-blue event, meaning friendly forces were shooting at each other, leading to multiple casualties. When the dust settled, the higher-ups wanted to know who was to blame for this terrible event. The truth was, it was multiple people's fault. There were so many people at fault, it was actually difficult for Jocko to pin the blame on a singular person. But when they asked Jocko point blank who was to blame for this event, he said,
"There was only one person at fault for what had happened. There was only one person to blame. And that person was me."
Jocko could have blamed multiple people, but he took it upon himself, just as Dom could have blamed an injury, ring rust, or a multitude of other things. After losing to a fighter who was crafted for a decade just to beat him, he offered no excuses. This is extreme ownership. We love to blame because it temporarily shields us from the sting of losing. You'll very often hear fighters talk about how they came in injured or had an off night, but that doesn't help you grow. In fact, making excuses may temporarily feel better, but it actually prevents you from growing. If you think you lost because of an injury, it will protect you from the sting, but you won't be motivated to fix your mistakes. If you think you lost because they were better, it will sting real bad, but you'll use that sting as motivation to not feel that feeling again, and you'll train relentlessly. Dom faces the sting of the loss head first, and a huge part of why he is able to do this is because of his diverse identity. When a fighter loses a big fight, it cuts deep into their soul, because very often, that is 100% of who they are. Dom is not just a fighter, so it's not the end of the world when he loses a fight. He has had one of the rockiest roads of any fighter to ever step in the cage, but his bulletproof mind carried him through it. And his bulletproof mind was crafted through first diversifying his identity and getting his self-worth from multiple sources so that when he loses one, it doesn't totally destroy who he is. Second, post-traumatic growth, seeing the silver lining in all the adversity that happened to him and choosing a story that served him. Instead of being an unlucky guy who keeps getting injured, he saw himself as a lucky guy who was gifted a new perspective. And this new perspective gave him a deeper purpose. Fighting to be the best in the world and make a better life for yourself is great. Serving the world through the unique gifts you've been given is even better and more fulfilling. And finally, his last technique was extreme ownership. No matter what happened to Dom, he never blamed anyone or anything. He owned everything in his life to an extreme level, and it's undoubtedly a huge part of why he is a future Hall of Famer. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. If you liked it and you want to learn more about extreme ownership, check out this video here. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one.